The first time I saw Eli, he was mending a fence by the road. His sleeves rolled up, the morning light catching on the curve of his forearms. I should have kept driving. I should have pretended I didn't see him. But there was something about the way he looked up, like the world was too loud for him, and silence was his only shield. I wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. A city boy from Philadelphia, driving through Lancaster County because I'd missed my exit. I stopped for gas, then for coffee, then somehow ended up on a dirt road that cut through fields of corn and quiet. And there he was, this man who looked like he belonged to another century. He smiled shyly when I asked for directions, and for a second, I forgot what I was even asking. His voice was calm, low, a melody without instruments. "The main road's that way," he said, pointing with his hammer. But I didn't leave. Something inside me wanted to stay. I told myself I just needed air, that I'd stretch my legs for a bit. But I kept finding excuses to come back. One day, I brought him coffee, black and steaming in a paper cup. He took it carefully like it was something sacred. "Do you always drink this?" he asked, sniffing the coffee. "Every morning," I said. "Keeps me human." He smiled, small but real. "We don't have that here. Too worldly." He said worldly like it was a sin. But I saw curiosity in his eyes, the kind that burns quietly, like a candle hidden under a blanket. Over the next few weeks, I started volunteering at the nearby farm where he worked, pretending it was just for the experience. I learned to stack hay, feed horses, fix fences. I learned how silence could say everything words couldn't. Eli didn't talk much, but when he did, his words stayed with me. He spoke about the rhythm of seasons, how the land teaches patience, how the world outside my world moved too fast, too loud, too carelessly. I told him about city lights, crowded bars, noise that never stops. I didn't tell him about the nights I spent alone, scrolling through dating apps, wondering if love was something meant for people like me. Then one night, the storm came. Rain fell in sheets, turning the dirt roads into rivers. The barn roof leaked in soft, steady drops, and we worked side by side trying to cover the hay. Thunder cracked, close and sharp, and Eli flinched. Without thinking, I reached out, my hand on his arm, firm, steady. He looked up and the world stopped. The lantern light caught in his eyes, wide, scared, wanting. I could hear both our breaths, uneven, matching. "You shouldn't," he whispered, but his voice broke on the last word. "I know," I said. The air between us trembled. Then he stepped closer. The rain outside grew louder, but inside the barn, it was silence and heartbeat. When our lips met, it wasn't fire. It was something slower, deeper, like finding home after being lost for too long. He pulled away first, his chest rising and falling fast. "Daniel," he said, and the way he said my name was both a plea and a prayer. This can't happen, but it already had. After that night, nothing was the same. We tried to pretend. We worked the fields, said good morning like strangers. But every glance was a confession. Every touch, accidental or not, was a reminder. He started avoiding me, walking home early, refusing my help. But one evening, I found him by the river, his hat off, hair wet from sweat and work. I sat beside him, the silence between us heavier than words. "You're leaving soon," he said. "I have to." He nodded. "Maybe that's best." I wanted to say I loved him. I wanted to ask him to come with me, to leave it all behind. The horses, the prayers, the rules that told him what love was supposed to look like. But I didn't, because I knew he couldn't. Instead, I asked, "Will you remember me?" He smiled, faint and sad. "I'll remember the sound of rain in the barn." That night, I packed my things. But before I left, I went back to the barn, the same one where the storm had caught us. The air still smelled of hay and secrets. He was there, waiting. No words, just two hands finding each other in the dark. The last touch before goodbye. When I drove away at dawn, the field stretched golden and endless, the sun rising behind me. I didn't cry, not then. It was only weeks later, back in the city, when I woke to the sound of rain tapping my window, that it all came back. The barn, his hands, the quiet kindness that changed everything. He would stay in his world and I in mine. But somewhere between them, our story still lived, in the space where love defied reason, and silence spoke the loudest truth of all. I thought that leaving him behind meant the ache would fade. Didn't. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. I went back to my job, my friends, the constant hum of the city. Everything was the same except me. I'd stand on subway platforms surrounded by strangers and see his face reflected in the train window. I'd wake up to the sound of cars outside and imagine it was the rhythm of horses' hooves on dirt. Eli became a ghost that followed me everywhere. Not haunting me, but holding me still in time. I tried to move on. I dated a few men, made small talk over drinks, tried to laugh at the right moments. But no one had his stillness. No one looked at me like the world could end and he'd still be gentle. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. At first it was just colors, the deep brown of the barn wood, the soft blue of his eyes. Then one day I painted him completely, standing under lantern light, rain behind him, his face half shadow, half hope. I didn't sign that painting. Some things are too sacred to claim. A year passed before I saw him again. I hadn't planned to. I was driving through Lancaster again for a photography project, a documentary on disappearing rural communities. When my producer suggested it, I almost said no. But something, maybe fate, maybe guilt, told me to go. The air smelled the same, like soil and grass and quiet. The fields still stretched forever. But when I turned down the old road toward the farm, my chest tightened. The barn was still there, faded, a little older, but standing proud against the horizon. I parked the car and stepped out, my shoes sinking into the soft earth. And there he was. He was unloading hay from a cart, sleeves rolled, that same linen shirt clinging to his arms. His hair was longer now, tied loosely at the back, and his face had changed, older, sharper, but his eyes, they were still Eli's eyes. He looked up, saw me, and for a moment the whole world held its breath. "Daniel," he said, my name breaking softly in the air. "Hey," I managed. "You still fixing fences?" He smiled, the same small, shy smile I remembered. Some things don't change. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to run into his arms, but all I could do was stand there, trying to pretend my heart wasn't coming apart. We talked about nothing and everything, about the weather, the crops, the new horses. I told him about my job, the cities I'd seen. He nodded politely, but I could see it, the pull, the tension, the thing that never went away. Finally, I asked the question that had lived in me for a year. "Did you ever tell anyone about us?" He looked down at the hay, his fingers brushing the strands. "No, I prayed instead. And I thought God would take it away." His voice trembled. But he didn't. I stepped closer, my throat tight. "Maybe that means it wasn't wrong." He didn't answer. The silence stretched between us again, thick and trembling. Then he said, "Come to the barn tonight, after dark." The words hit me like lightning, simple, direct, impossible. That night the sky was clear. No rain this time, just stars. The barn glowed faintly under the moon, the same lantern still hanging from the beam. He was waiting for me inside. We didn't speak. I could hear the crickets outside, the soft rustle of hay underfoot. He looked at me, his breath uneven, and in that look was everything we had buried: fear, longing, love. "I can't stop thinking about that night," he said finally. "I tried, but I can't." "Then don't," I whispered. He took a step toward me, then another, until he was close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body. His hand found my face, trembling. "I don't know what this means," he said. "I don't know what happens after this." "You don't have to," I told him. "You just have to feel it." And then, once again, he kissed me. This time there was no storm, no thunder, just quiet. The kind of quiet that lives between two people who've finally stopped lying to themselves. It was slow, reverent, full of everything we'd both been too afraid to say. When we pulled apart, his eyes were wet. "I can't leave," he said softly. "My family, my community, they'd never understand." "I know. But I also can't keep pretending I don't feel this." I reached up, touched his cheek. "Then don't. Not tonight." We stayed there for hours, talking in whispers, holding on to something fragile and infinite. The lantern burned low, the night faded into gray dawn, and we both knew this couldn't last. But for those few hours, it didn't matter. When the first light slipped through the cracks in the wood, he looked at me and said, "You have to go before they see." I wanted to fight it. I wanted to stay. But love, real love, isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting the other person stay whole. I left without looking back. That was 5 years ago. Now I live in New York. My art's been shown in small galleries, nothing big, but enough. One of my most talked about pieces is called The Barn in Rain. Critics say it's about forbidden love, about religion, about guilt and redemption. They're not wrong. But for me, it's about one man, quiet, kind, and brave in ways no one would ever see. Last week, I got a letter. No return address. Just my name written in neat, careful handwriting I'd know anywhere. Inside was a single photograph. 2 hands, his and mine, covered in hay dust, clasped together. Below it, a note. "Some things don't fade. I hope you found peace." I did. I read it over and over, until the ink smudged from my tears. Peace, that's what he found. Maybe not freedom, maybe not a different life, but peace. And for the first time, I realized I'd found mine too. Because love doesn't always need a happy ending to be real. Sometimes it just needs to be remembered, quietly, like a prayer whispered in the dark of a barn, where 2 souls once met and changed each other forever. Eli once told me that everything in his world was built on seasons: birth, growth, harvest, rest. I used to think our story ended in the harvest, in loss. But maybe we were just resting. Sometimes, late at night, I paint him again. Not the barn, not the rain. Just his face, half turned toward the light. And I wonder if somewhere, in that quiet valley, he's looking up at the same sky, thinking of me too. If he is, I hope he knows. I never stopped loving him. Not for a single day. Months passed after I received Eli's letter, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'd set it on my kitchen table, right next to the coffee mug I never washed completely clean, and every morning I'd read it again. I'd trace his handwriting with my thumb, slow, careful, like touching him through time. I tried to imagine what his life looked like now. Did he still wake before sunrise? Did he still whisper prayers under his breath as the world began to stir? Did he still pause at the edge of the field, just to watch the light change? And most of all, did he ever think about me when it rained? I started seeing someone new around then. Alex. He was kind, funny, lived in the same building. We met at an art show where my painting The Barn in Rain was displayed. He said it was beautiful, then asked what it meant. "Something I lost," I told him. We went for coffee afterward. He liked to talk about movies, politics, the chaos of city life. I liked listening. For a while, being around him felt easy, like standing in sunlight after years of winter. But love isn't just about ease. It's about truth. And there were nights when I'd wake up beside him and feel that ache. Not of missing someone, but of unfinished belonging. One night, he found me sitting at my desk, staring at the old photograph Eli had sent. "Who's that?" Alex asked. I hesitated. Then I said the name I hadn't spoken aloud in years. Eli. He didn't ask much, just nodded. But I saw the question in his eyes. Was he the one? "Yes," I said quietly. "He was." Alex reached for my hand. "Do you still love him?" The honest answer would have hurt him, so I stayed silent. That silence was enough. Over the next few months, Alex and I drifted apart. There was no fight, no betrayal, just the slow unraveling of something that was never meant to hold. When he finally moved out, he left a note. "You're still in that barn, Daniel. You never left." He was right. I thought maybe returning there one last time would set me free, not to rekindle anything, but to say goodbye properly. So I drove back to Lancaster. It was early autumn, the kind of day when the air carries both warmth and warning. The road looked the same, though the cornfields had thinned. The farm stood still, weathered, stubborn, eternal. But Eli was gone. His family had moved north, one of the neighbors told me. "He married last year," she added. "A good woman. Quiet. Like him." I thanked her, though my voice didn't sound like mine. I drove to the barn anyway. The doors were half open, the smell of earth and time thick in the air. Dust floated through shafts of afternoon light. I stood there, in the same spot where we'd once stood together, and felt everything, the rain, the touch, the fear, the love. It hit me all at once. Eli hadn't just been part of my story. He was the story. Without him, I wouldn't have learned what it meant to see beauty in silence, to find courage in tenderness, to love even when love was impossible. I knelt, pressed my palm to the floorboards. They were rough and cold, but for a second, I swear I felt warmth, as if memory itself had a pulse. And then I said the words I'd never had the strength to say. "I forgive you, and I forgive myself." The wind outside shifted, carrying the faint smell of rain. When I walked out, I didn't look back this time. That night, I stayed in a small inn on the edge of town. The owner, an old woman with kind eyes, asked if I was visiting family. "No," I said, "just passing through." She smiled. "Sometimes the places we pass through stay with us longer than the ones we live in." Her words settled in my chest. Couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the sky darken. Lightning flickered far away, silent and distant. I thought about the barn, about that night years ago when the storm had pulled us together. And then suddenly I understood. It was never about losing him. It was about learning that love, real love, doesn't always end when it should. Sometimes it lives quietly in you, reshaping who you are, long after the person is gone. I picked up my sketchbook and started to draw. Not him this time, not even us. Just the barn, but empty, peaceful, whole. By dawn, the page was covered in lines that looked like light breaking through clouds. When I drove home the next morning, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Not the silence of loss, but the kind that comes after understanding. 2 years later, my gallery in New York hosted a new exhibition. The centerpiece was a massive canvas called After the Rain. It showed 2 figures, one standing in light, one in shadow, separated by a wooden doorway. Between them, a single hand reached through the dark, fingers stretched but not touching. When people asked about it, I said it was about distance, faith, and the kind of love that refuses to vanish. After the opening night, as the crowd thinned, a man approached me. He wore a plain shirt, suspenders, and a straw hat in his hands. His hair was shorter now, streaked with gray. My breath caught. "Eli," I whispered. He smiled, the same quiet smile I'd carried in my memory for years. "I saw your painting in a magazine," he said. "Didn't think you'd remember me." "I never forgot," I said. "Not once." He nodded slowly, his eyes shining. "I came to thank you for seeing me, really seeing me, when I couldn't even see myself." We stood there, surrounded by the hum of the city, yet it felt like the barn all over again. Stillness between chaos. "I have a family now," he said softly. "A good one. They don't know everything, but I've made peace with who I am." "I'm glad," I said, and I meant it. He took a deep breath. "And you? Are you happy?" I thought for a long time. "I'm learning how to be. That's enough." He smiled again, set his hat back on and said, "Keep painting, Daniel." Then he turned and walked into the night. I watched him go until he disappeared into the crowd, swallowed by the city lights. That quiet, kind man who once taught me that love, doesn't always need forever to be true. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood alone after the rain. The gallery lights glowed soft and warm, and for a moment, I could almost hear it again. The storm outside, the whisper of hay, the soft tremor of his voice saying my name. I smiled. Love hadn't abandoned me. It had simply changed shape from something I held to something I carried inside. And in that quiet, surrounded by art and memory, I finally understood the truth I'd been chasing all along. Some stories don't end. They just become part of who we are. Years slipped by like wind over wheat. I grew older without meaning to. My hair grayed at the edges, my hands carried more lines than before, but every time I looked at them, I still saw the boy who once reached out in a barn during a thunderstorm and found another boy reaching back. Life had settled into a rhythm. I taught art now, mostly to college students who wanted to find meaning in brushstrokes and color. I told them that the most honest thing an artist can do is to remember, not perfectly but truthfully. They didn't always understand what I meant, but sometimes one or two of them did, and that was enough. Every autumn, I'd drive out of the city, not always to Lancaster but somewhere with fields and silence. I'd bring my sketchbook, sit under a tree, and let memory come and go. There were years when it hurt less, and others when it came back sharper, like a sudden storm after months of sun. I never saw Eli again, not in person, but every so often, I'd receive something small, a photograph of a landscape, a postcard with a verse written on the back, and signed but unmistakably him. One of them came on a gray October morning. It showed an empty field at dawn, golden light cutting through fog. On the back, for words, "The harvest is done." I held it for a long time, wondering what he meant. Maybe it was just about the season, or maybe it was his way of saying goodbye, the real one, the one we never managed to have. I didn't cry. I just placed the postcard on my desk beside his first letter. Two ends of the same story, resting quietly together. That winter, a former student of mine invited me to speak at a small-town gallery in Pennsylvania. I almost declined. Traveling wasn't easy anymore, and my bones preferred warmth, but something about the location caught my eye. The address was less than 10 miles from where Eli's farm had once stood. So I went. The gallery was small but beautiful, the kind of place where art and silence coexist. My exhibit was called Unspoken Things, a collection of portraits and landscapes about the spaces between people, about moments that never fully leave you. After the opening, a woman approached me. She was in her 30s, plain dress, kind eyes that reminded me of someone I used to know. She said she was from the Amish community nearby. "My father wanted me to thank you," she said. "He saw your work in a magazine years ago. He said it helped him forgive himself." I felt the world tilt slightly beneath me. My voice was barely a whisper when I asked, "Your father's name?" "Eli Miller," she said. "He passed away last spring." Something inside me stilled. The room grew quiet, the noise of the gallery fading into a soft hum. She handed me a small envelope. "He asked me to give you this if we ever crossed paths. He said I'd know when I met you." I took it, my fingers trembling. "Thank you," I managed. That night, alone in my hotel room, I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges, written in that same neat handwriting I'd once memorized. "Daniel, I've spent my life trying to understand what love means. They told me it was obedience, duty, sacrifice. But I think it's simpler than that. Love is what changes you, quietly, completely, without asking permission. You changed me. I used to think the night in the barn was a sin. Now I know it was grace, the kind that doesn't come from churches or rules, but from the way one heart can see another and not look away. I built a good life here. My wife is kind. My children are strong. I've taught them to see beauty in difference, to meet others with gentleness first. Maybe that's how love continues, not by holding on, but by passing it forward. When I die, don't mourn. Just remember the sound of the rain and know that somewhere, I'm remembering it too. With quiet gratitude, Eli. I read the letter again and again until the words blurred. I hadn't cried in years, but that night I did. Not from grief, from the strange, aching beauty of being loved like that, even after everything had ended. Outside, snow began to fall. I opened the window and let the cold air rush in. The world was silent, endless, clean. Somewhere far away, I imagined a barn standing alone in the dark, a lantern glowing faintly, a promise still alive inside its walls. I kept Eli's letter in a frame on my studio wall, not for others to see but for me, a reminder that love doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes it hides in quiet corners of memory, waiting for the courage to be understood. My students often asked why I never painted faces anymore. Because some faces don't belong to the world, I'd say. They belong to the heart. One spring, a young man stayed after class to talk. He was shy, nervous, the kind of quiet that hides too much thinking. He said, "I grew up in a conservative family. I think if they knew who I really was, they'd stop loving me." I looked at him for a long time, then said, "They might not understand at first, but love, real love, doesn't vanish because it's tested. It deepens." He nodded, eyes wet. "How do you know?" "Because someone once taught me," I said. That night, after he left, I sat at my desk and opened my old sketchbook. On the last page, I drew the barn again. But this time it wasn't dark or raining. The doors were open, sunlight spilling through, warm and endless. At the center, two figures stood side by side, not touching, just close enough for the light between them to mean something. And finally, I signed my name at the bottom. For years, I'd refused to claim that part of my story. But now I understood. It wasn't shame that had kept me silent. It was reverence. Some loves are too sacred to end in words, but they still deserve to be spoken. On the day I retired, I gave that painting to the same young man who'd come to me years before. "Take this," I told him. "It's yours now." He looked confused. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "It belongs to anyone who's ever been brave enough to love quietly." He promised to keep it safe. As I watched him walk away, carrying the painting in his hands, I felt a peace I hadn't known in decades. The story was no longer mine alone. It belonged to every person who had ever stood in the dark, terrified and trembling, and still reached out anyway. Years later, when my hands were too unsteady to hold a brush, I would still sit by the window and watch the rain. Each drop against the glass felt like a memory, a heartbeat, a reminder that somewhere in time, a young man named Eli had taught me the meaning of quiet courage. And every now and then, when thunder rolled softly in the distance, I would close my eyes, smile, and whisper into the echo, "I remember," because love, once found, never really leaves. It just changes its form, from touch to memory, from silence to art, from a single night in a barn to a lifetime of meaning. And that, I think, is all anyone ever really wants. To be remembered. To be seen. To be loved, quietly, endlessly, even after the rain.